Welcome, everyone. I'm Chris with Tampa Hillsborough County Public Library, and I'm joined by Tanisha. How are you doing, Tanisha?
I am wonderful. I am excited to talk a little bit about iOS this afternoon.
Great. Well, then, if that's the case, I'm going to hand things over to you, and I'll be here in the background. Take it over.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris. So we're going to go ahead and launch right into things. This is a topic that I'm really excited about. I am an Apple girl. I love my Apple products, so it's going to be fun to talk a little bit about the basics of iOS and how it got started, where it is now, and how you can use it. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off my webcam and let's go ahead and launch right into things. So before we get started, a lot of you guys may be familiar with our program flow and how we oftentimes start with the resource shout out. There will still be a resource shout out, but we're just going to talk about the resources that we have available to you a little bit later. So we are first going to cover the history of iOS. So iOS is one of Apple's signature operating system. It debuted in 2007 to power the first generation iPhone. And before this, the iOS and the iPhone really revolutionized the idea of using a smartphone. So you guys probably remember before, in the before times, back in the early 2000s, there was the Palm Pilot, there was the BlackBerry. The BlackBerry, at least back when I was in college, back in the early 2000s, was really, really popular. And it had that teeny tiny little keyboard that you would use to type out messages to people. But the iPhone really brought the smartphone to the masses. So that was like the first wildly popular iPhone that was made for everybody to use. The BlackBerry was initially meant to be used by business people or people that needed to be connected at all times. The iPhone was the first device that was truly made for everybody. So it didn't matter if you were a business person or what, the iPhone was meant for everybody. So it was created by Steve Jobs, who's on the screen there. I know a lot of us are familiar with who Steve Jobs is. And the iPhone OS is what it was originally known as. So iOS is a current iteration, was meant to shrink the MacBook and the iMac, which are like the desktop and the laptop of the Apple world, and enlarge the iPod. So a lot of you may remember the iPod from the early 2000s. So that was one of the major MP3 players that was out on the market. And Steve Jobs really wanted to find a way to marry the two. So he wanted the functionality of a computer that could fit in your pocket, and he also wanted some of the features of the iPod, of like being able to play music and all of that. So Apple's mobile operating systems have expanded to iPad OS. So the iPad came out in 2010, and then in 2019, they made a separate operating system for the iPad, so that branched off from the iPhone operating system. This is where you get iOS and iPad OS. Also, tvOS was formed. That came out in 2015. So Apple TV, which a lot of people may be familiar with, it has its own operating system, and the Watch operating system. So that also came out in 2015. So that is an operating system for the Apple Watch. So the most current version of iOS is iOS 15, and it was just released last month. So September 2021, just released last month. I personally just put it onto my iPhone. Still looking at some of the features and how they work. It definitely has a bunch of different looks to it, especially if you use Safari, if you use text messages and things like that, iMessage. It definitely has a couple of new looks to it, a couple of changes to the font, but all in all, it's pretty good. It is also released, the operating systems are released usually annually. Another cool fact about the iOS and the operating system is that it is the second most utilized mobile operating system in the world. So this is after Android. And that's pretty significant considering that you can only use the iOS on Apple devices, which we're going to talk about here in just a minute. So significant features of the iOS. So I tried to have my little stick dude here kicking the apple. Hopefully I succeeded in that. But significant features and what makes the iOS and the iPhone and the mobile devices stick out. So the biggest one is the touchscreen interface. Now, of course, Steve Jobs and Apple did not invent the touchscreen. However, they really revolutionized the way that it's used. So they really umped it up and made it into what we know as today. So, you know, the concepts of tapping and swiping, that kind of started with the iPhone. Apple also made these interface easy to use. They made big, easy to identify interface, like the app faces. So like when you're looking for things like the calendar, the phone, your messages, they made those little icons really easy to identify, so you can just tap on them and bring up what you need. The App Store. So I'm sure we all remember back when iPhones came out in 2007, the phrase, there's an app for that. So Apple really were the first ones on the market with the idea of applications or apps. So all those different apps that you can use for whatever you can think of. Now apps have become so ubiquitous in our culture that it's something that you don't even think of. You're like, oh, apps. But this was really a really groundbreaking thing when the iPhone first came out, is the idea that you could download apps to do tasks. So this is a really big deal. There are currently between 1 and 2 million apps in the App Store, so a whole bunch of apps that you can choose from. Funnily enough, and kind of a little bit of a tidbit, Apple owns the term App Store. So technically, nobody else could use the term App Store to explain what their application store is. So right now, they are currently in litigation with another big tech giant, Amazon, over the use of App Store, because Amazon currently calls their App Store the Amazon App Store, and Apple doesn't really like it. So they are duking it out in court right now. Another really cool feature of Apple devices, and one of the reasons why I personally am a huge fan of Apple devices, is the idea of handoff. So if you have an iPhone and you have an iPad, you can bring up what is on your iPad, on your iPhone onto your iPad, vice versa. Same thing with the watch. Everything is very seamless. It's a very seamless experience. So I can have my text message show up on all of my Apple devices. I can have my notifications show up on all of my Apple devices. So it's a really, really seamless experience. If I'm watching something on my phone, I can bring it up on my iPad. I can bring it up on my MacBook. It's a really, really seamless experience. And Apple did really do a good job with that experience. It's one of my favorite reasons for using Apple products. I really like it. Another thing that's not really talked about a lot is their assistive technology. They really, and I keep on using the word revolutionize, but Apple really did revolutionize a lot of these things. So the idea of assistive technology with your devices. So one thing that they have is voiceover. So for those who are who have sight issues, who can't see very well, they have something called voiceover, which reads everything that's on your screen. And one of the cool things about this is that voiceover can also describe things like photo scenery. So if you tap or if you bring up a photo, it can explain to you what the photo is, which is a really, really cool thing. So you might be asking yourself, you know, I'm here for iOS basics. Are you going to show us how to use it? Well, sort of. So one of the things about iOS and iPads and iPhones is that there are literally hundreds of features for these phones, and some of those features and how you utilize them depend on the version you have. So like I just said, I currently have iOS 15 on my phone, but I haven't updated my iPad yet. So the experience I have on my phone and my iPad are two separate things, even though I have both devices. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use, hundreds of different ways that you can use your device. So as I mentioned before, normally when we start out our programs, we start with a book or resource shout out. I moved it here so that we could talk about all of the ways that you can learn to use your iPhone or your iPad that we have available to you via the library. So all of these are free things that you can access via the library. So with LinkedIn Learning, they have iPhone and iPad tips and trips, iOS 14 and iPad OS essential training, and iPhone and iPad new features. So you may notice the stars next to that. As I mentioned before, Apple just came out with a new version of their operating system. So LinkedIn Learning is really, really good at updating and putting out new information whenever there's an update. So just keep your eye out for that, because they're probably going to have iOS 15 up pretty soon. But if you want to learn how to use the features of your phone or your iPad, this is a great place to start. The essential training videos, at least I know for the iOS 14 iPad OS essential training, that one is like 3 hours long. So there's a lot of information that you can learn about using your devices there. There's also another one called GCF Learn Free. And this one's a little bit more condensed. So they have iPhone basics, iPad basics, and mobile device tips. So if you want to learn how to use the features of your phone or your iPad, your iPhone or your iPad, these are wonderful places to start. If you're wondering, where do I even start? Like, there's so many things that I can learn about these devices. Where do I begin? Is think about how you want to use your device. So what's important to you? So for me, it's staying in communication with my friends and family. So I would focus on how to use the messaging, how to use iMessage, how to do all of that, how to do voice to text, so I can, press the little microphone button and just talk to my sister and send it via text message. If you're really big into photography, like if you really love taking pictures, you may want to focus on the photo app and how to take wonderful pictures with your iPhone or your iPad. So just focus in on what you really want to know about your device and go from there. If you want to know about the security, there's a security video. There's so many things out there. And along with these resources that are available through the library, there's also other places like YouTube and stuff that have a bunch of really awesome tutorials that you can use. So now that we've talked a little bit about iOS basics, I'm going to come back on camera and Chris is going to join me. And we are going to see if there are any questions. So as a reminder, if you do have any questions about iOS, iPads, or iPhones, please drop them into the questions section. If you're on a tablet or a mobile device, tap on that little question icon. If you're on a desktop or a laptop, just put them into the questions section. And Chris, while we are waiting for questions, and you'll let me know if there are any, I'm just going to go ahead and cover our information here. So of course, you need to contact the library. There is our contact link there. We're available by phone, email, text, chat, however you'd like to contact us, we are available. If you would like to see what other programs or events we have going on with the library, you can go there. Right now, we are finishing up with Hispanic Heritage Month. We're in the middle of Teen Lit Fest, which is a really awesome event. And we have our big read event with Joy Harjo coming up. So if you want to see what's going on with that, definitely take a look at our events calendar. If you want to learn more about tech topics or any tech related subjects, there's our link there. And next week, we talked about iOS and Apple devices. We have got to talk about Android as well. So we're going to be doing that next week.
Okay. I think we do have one question. Let's see. They want to know, is it simple to transfer text or photos, etc., from Android to iPhone? Someone says they're taking a leap from Android to iOS and they're wondering how easy it would be to transfer that stuff.
So what I would suggest doing is yes and no. Apple loves, and I apologize, I skipped over that line. I did have a line in there about how proprietary Apple is with their stuff. So Apple really wants you to stay on their products. So they're going to make it a little difficult for you to leave their products. So what I would suggest doing, if you have photos or other files that you would like to transfer over to your new Apple device, is use a platform like Google Drive or Google Photos and put all of your stuff there and then transfer it onto, you don't even have to transfer it actually, because all you have to do, and I have this app because we use HP devices at work. So sometimes if I have something on my iPad that I want to pull on there, this is really easy. Just download the Google Drive app or the Google Photos app, and then you can have access to all your files that way. So put all the files you need to onto Google Drive or Google Photos, and then you can access them that way. You don't have to download them to your device. They're available on as long as you have the username and password for that Google Drive account, then you have access to it wherever you are. So that was my suggestion, especially if you use multiple devices or multiple platforms like I do. So I'm an Apple girl in my personal life and at work. We are a PC world. So I use something like Google Drive, and it doesn't have to be Google Drive, but just a non-proprietary file storage to store all of your stuff.
All right. Okay, I think that is it for questions. So That was great. Thank you for that wonderful question. And we've already
Yes.
shared our contact information. And same time, same place next week, right? Android Basics. You already mentioned that as well.
So yeah, we got to cover both sides. We talked about Apple, we're going to talk about Android next week.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, everyone. Thank you, Tunisia, for another great tech topics. And we'll see you all soon. Have a great evening.
Bye, everybody. Bye.